So I don't know whether you had the time today to listen to the sort of Castro-like speech that Donald Trump gave in Davos, but he repeatedly said that the UK, and I guess this means you, Ed, were failing, or rather committing a sort of act of economic vandalism by not exploiting the North Sea. What do you say to that?
Obviously, I did hear some of the speech, Robert. Obviously, I disagree with him on this. Is a long-standing area of difference that we've had with President Trump. Look, fundamentally, his point is the answer for Britain is fossil fuels. But we know fossil fuels won't give us energy security. And you don't need to take my word for it. We saw what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine and prices went through the roof because of our dependence on fossil fuels. And that's because we're a price taker, not a price maker when it comes to fossil fuel markets. Whether the gas comes from the North Sea or imported, the price is the same. And it was the last Conservative government, actually, who said more drilling in the North Sea won't bring down bills. The only way to bring down bills for good for Britain, and the position is different for the US, the way to bring down bills for good is with homegrown clean power that we control, which is why our incredibly successful offshore wind auction last week, enough to power 12 million homes, is so important for our energy security.
Well, on that, he also said only stupid people buy what he calls windmills, and that is wind turbines. How stupid are you?
Look, I think one of the lessons I learned from the Prime Minister's approach on this is the point with the President is he has his own style. We're not going to sort of, trade views on this. I'm not sure he's that interested in my views anyway. But look, I think fundamentally when you look across the world, you see actually the growth of offshore wind in many places. I mean, China is responsible for about half of the world's offshore wind capacity. Second place is the United Kingdom. So lots of countries use offshore wind or onshore wind, indeed. And it's precisely, actually, Robert, and this was very clear to me at COP30, where I was in Brazil in November, for energy security as well as climate reasons. People see the importance of homegrown clean energy they control rather than fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators, where the price can fluctuate and you're on the roller coaster.
And just to be clear, I mean, one of the things he did say, which is just straightforwardly false, is that there are, in his view, as I say, his language, no windmills, no wind farms in China. Something like 17% of all its power comes from wind farms. I mean, you broadly, when it comes to energy, you are closer, frankly, now you are closer to what China is doing than what America's doing, aren't you?
No, look, I think that's, not
this
quite right.
This is not a pejorative point I'm making, it's just a fact.
Well, look, the way I would put it is that with our US allies, we found common ground on nuclear. And we've found all kinds of ways, and this happened at the state visit, of where we're taking forward incredibly exciting agreements between British companies, US companies on small modular reactors, advanced modular reactors. And so there is common ground. And in a way, this is part of the approach. We seek to find common ground, but obviously there are areas of disagreement. On China, look, the point about China is to engage with them. Some of what they're doing is good in relation to energy. Some of it I don't agree with. But, engagement is important because we can only tackle the climate crisis if we get the world's largest emitter to be part of what needs to happen, and that's China.
In respect of your great clean power plan that you've announced today, part of it is to make sure that a big proportion of the manufacturing relating to it, particularly these heat pumps, which are a more efficient way of heating people's homes, something like 70%, I think, is your target for them to be made in Britain. But what do you mean, though, by made in Britain? Because, of course, many of the parts of these heat pumps will be made abroad. How are you going to police it?
Well, it's about the manufacture. The key point about this, and I think this is, again, a global trend, is that we see huge advantage for homegrown clean power when it comes to energy security, when it comes to lower bills, but also, crucially, when it comes to jobs. Part of our offshore wind auction that we announced last week was thousands of jobs that are going to be created, including in supply chains. And we want to do the same when it comes to heat pumps. We are a leading European manufacturer of boilers. We also have huge opportunity in relation to heat pumps. Only about 40% of the heat pumps that are actually used in Britain are currently manufactured in Britain. We want that number to go up. And we're going to have an active industrial policy, including supporting the companies to start manufacturing those heat pumps here in Britain. It's just a big source of economic opportunity. But of course, we have global supply chains. And look, I think we live in a dangerous world. We've got to be careful about where we get our supply chains from. But we're not talking about a world in which we somehow, have a sort of Fortress Britain approach. Supply chains will continue to be global, but we want more of it made in Britain.
But on that point that we live in a more dangerous, more volatile world, you will have seen, I'm sure, that the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, says that middle-sized countries like us must form deep, strong alliances with like-minded countries. Otherwise, we'll end up being Donald Trump's lunch. Why aren't we doing this?
Well, I think we are. I think the Carney speech was a really...
Where are these deep alliances with the likes of Carney, for example, or the EU, for that matter?
Well, look, I'll give you a very good example. When Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, people said it's going to have a domino effect around the world. At the COP30 summit in Brazil in November, 190 plus countries once again recommitted to the Paris Agreement, recommitted to 1.5 degrees. About 80 countries said they wanted to see a roadmap on the transition away from fossil fuels, global north, global south. These are the multilateral alliances that Mark Carney is talking about in his speech. I will be at the North Sea Summit on Monday, a group of countries that are working together on how we can have clean energy and use the North Sea. So absolutely. And you know what? There's something really interesting here, Robert, which is that, President Trump has his own positions on these questions. What I hear from lots of countries around the world is they see they want to fight for multilateralism. They recognize we can only tackle global problems by working together.
And so, on that, will you be urging the Prime Minister to go faster and deeper in terms of trade alliances with the European Union?
Well, that's what the Prime Minister wants to do. And look, energy is at the forefront. But is he going
fast enough or deep enough? Many would say not.
I think he is driving forward with this. Look, what we are doing in energy is not only linking our emissions trading schemes, and the negotiations have begun on that, but working out with the European Union how we can be part of the electricity market, because there are gains to consumers, gains in terms of jobs for us doing so. So that is proceeding. And obviously our alliance with the European Union is incredibly important. And, recent events only serve to demonstrate that.
And therefore, on that, in what sense is our relationship with America special at all, in a positive sense, when you've got a president who accuses the Prime Minister of, this is Trump's words, great stupidity, was what he publicly accused the Prime Minister of in giving up ownership of Chagos. This is abusive language.
Look, President Trump has his own style, and obviously I'm saying that diplomatically, but I think the approach the Prime Minister has taken, and I think this has been the right approach over the last year, is not to engage in commentary on President Trump's commentary, because he didn't think that would be productive for Britain, but instead to engage in the hard yards of diplomacy, to seek to find common ground, and where there is disagreement, to call it out. And
hang on. Where has he explicitly called out Donald Trump? Explicitly?
Well, on Greenland. I mean, look, he could not have been clearer, Robert, on Greenland, which is that the sovereignty of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark. And as he said in the House of Commons today, he will not yield on our values and what we stand for in relation to that issue.
You don't stand for it, but you've got Europe talking about retaliatory tariffs. We're nowhere on that. We're not going to do retaliatory tariffs, are we?
I think the responsible way of proceeding in this is to do everything we can to avoid a trade war. A trade war is in nobody's interests. And so the approach that Keir is taking, and look, I saw the Danish Foreign Minister on Monday. The truth is the Danish Foreign Minister had actually what he described to me as quite a productive meeting on Arctic security with Vice President Vance in Washington on Friday. The right way to proceed on this is to seek to find ways forward in which we can strengthen Arctic security and avert the threat of a trade war and the tariffs and so on. Look, nobody in the UK government believes, and Keir has been absolutely clear about this, that President Trump should be using the threat of tariffs in the way that he is, and Keir could not have been clearer about this. We've got to do everything we can for our businesses and indeed globally to avoid a trade war, because it will be economically deeply damaging.
A couple of final questions. If the EU do decide to go down the retaliatory route with, for example, the imposition of tariffs against the United States, should we join them?
I'm going to frustrate you, Robert, but this is what responsible government is about.
I'm not
going to start speculating about that. Because I think getting into hypotheticals about where we end up and what we would do in the event of an escalating trade war, the much better thing to do is to work with our allies, including with the EU, to avert this threat of a trade war. This is in no and look, we have succeeded before in pushing President Trump back from the brink on this, and that's what we need to do again.
Finally, not on a hypothetical, Donald Trump wants the Prime Minister to join his board of peace and sit on a board of peace with the Russian and Belarusian dictators, Lukashenko, Putin. Should the Prime Minister join that board of peace?
Well, look, we've obviously received the invitation on this. We're very concerned about the potential presence of President Putin on that board of peace. And so, obviously, we're going to be discussing with our American allies how we go about addressing some of these issues. So again, I think this is where the diplomacy, and this is what the Foreign Secretary I've discussed this with is engaged in. That's where the diplomacy and the work with the allies is important. The most important thing for us in relation to Gaza is that the ceasefire holds, that we begin reconstruction of Gaza, and that we work towards the two-state solution that we all want to see. That's what's in our interests, and we are engaging with our American counterparts on the right way forward.
Ed Miliband, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.